Floor is yours. Take it away.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Anna Maria, and everyone for joining. I'll quickly introduce myself and then Tijana. Madeeha, I hope is joining. I've just dropped her a message, see where she's at. But she might be stuck in something, and then I'll kick off with I'll share my screen if that's okay. So yeah, I'm Saad. I have a day job. I'm head of strategy and transformation at a housing company. We have 700 properties around the UK. But on the side, I love to spend time just running lots of free workshops for leaders and managers. It can take its toll, but I'm enjoying it, and hopefully this can be a full-time thing. Before this, I was an executive general manager at a global company, private equity backed, and that was senior executive role. And I got to that level, and I enjoyed coaching a lot of managers, which is why then I left that role to do more of a consultancy role and go full time into leading and managing through training and interactive learning experiences. Tihana, over to you.
Thank you. So I'm Tijana. I've been working in HR for the last 13 years. I've grown from a small manufacturing plant to a global HR BP role, having multiple regions. I've worked with a lot of leaders, and these projects really piqued my interest because of my coaching background. And I'm a professional certified coach, recognized and accredited by the ICF. I'm super excited about this because managers have a huge impact. So when Saad asked about this project, I was like, let me in, because it's an amazing opportunity to impact managers early on. So I'm super excited to be here and discuss this project with you.
Awesome. So before I go on, I want to give a big shout out to someone, and I hope I'm not embarrassing her. Anna Maria, without Shakers, this project wouldn't exist. And what you do for the community is super awesome. So I just wanted to give flowers to someone whilst I still can. I actually looked and there is a flower emoji. So here you go. That's my flower for you. And I really appreciate everything you're doing and creating this forum to even share. So thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen. I don't want to embarrass you too much. Hopefully
I'm
everyone
already feeling a bit emotional. I'm not used to it, so much love pouring. Thank you.
You should. You deserve it. Hopefully everyone can see that all right. So I'm just going to rattle through. So this product that we created, the workshop that we created is called Get Me Manager Ready. Really nice name that we came up with. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. The thing that I do on the side is called Managerkind, play on the word mankind, Managerkind, to try and create bold and kind leaders who will say the tough things but with respect. So that's what we do. Where this project really kicked off was really in the summer of last year. I mean, I've got a personal experience in this where I was a manager when I was 17. Came in one day and I was asked, do you mind just stepping in for just a couple of days, a week? And that week turned into a month and it turned into a year. And then I became a senior executive when I was 29 and literally managing people that were much more experienced than me. And I've not been trained to date. It's all been self-taught and experience. So I've seen a lot of managers suffer from serious self-doubt. And we found in the research that I did last year with about 50 managers that 70% didn't have an induction. And I don't mean sort of those ones that are about policies and company priorities. I mean more, you're an individual contributor, you're stepping up to being a manager, this is going to change. And in my research that we did last year, they said it's just too full of jargon, the training that people are providing at the moment to first-time managers, beginner managers. I don't know the difference between managing and leading. Now you're telling me and asking me to be a coach. What on earth does that mean? And all of these skills that you see there is just too complex for managers to understand. So the task that I set myself and then pulled in a lot of colleagues was to say, could we fix this problem? And what would it look like? Completely creating something new from complete scratch. So everything that we're going to show you today is completely new, and it's all interactive with zero theory. I'm anti-theory. It's like zero slides. I have an allergy to this. So if there was a thing to tick, if you have an allergy, it would be against any theoretical frameworks. They obviously have their place, but there's a certain better way I think we could do that. So I also want to give a big shout out, though, even though me and Tijana and Madeeha are facilitating these workshops, there was a wider group of 5 other people. Inez is on the call. Massive shout out to her. Andrea, Shabs, There's people who were not Shakers who were also part as well. Ella, Adam, just want to give a big shout out to them for helping us move to what was then the final product. We then had a lot of conversation about how can we provide what we call a stepping stone, like preparatory skills, before we give managers these deeper managerial skills that you saw on the previous slide. So rather than getting into coaching and delegating, we felt actually we need to get managers used to, newbies used to the concept of how to be hands-off and acting as a guide, which you will see in the middle there. Before we can get help people to understand strategic thinking, we've got to help them understand how to be independent first and think for themselves. So you can see that the language is really accessible, really stripped back, and then we've created later on more deeper workshops for managers. So we came up with the prep skills, stepping stone skills, whatever you like to call them, in a really fun and accessible sort of language that people can understand. We do have a 3-line sort of blurb, a descriptor for each one as well, which I can share offline with colleagues. Or if you go into the website links that I will share with you shortly, you'll be able to see exactly what they mean there as well. So we spent a lot of time in the first 2 workshops just debating. We had a long list of about 18 skills, and we shortlisted them down to these 5 based on our personal experiences, based on the research with those 50 managers. Some of it came out from there, and just the dialogue rich dialogue and research that we did together. I'm handing over to, well, is Madeeha on the call? Because that kind of messes up the flow a little bit. I'm guessing she's not been able to make it. Okay, no worries.
I don't see her.
That's totally fine. So I'll hand over to Hannah though, just to take us through the program and just a brief sort of approach that we took to designing it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So what we did here is to really think about how do we get those managers a little bit ahead of where they are now. And the fact that we wanted it a jargon-free was very intentional because of all the things that we discussed during the sessions. And we learned how much each one of us had this experience with jargons and having everything packed into one skill, one training, and you are ready to be a manager. It's much more complex than that. And we decided, okay, how do we make a difference? And that's where the stepping stones were decided. The session itself was pretty intense. It was a couple of activities and a break in the middle. We had managers sharing their stories, which was very impactful from my point of view, having them share what worked for them, what were the hard parts for them. The creativity of doing it on the spot, putting people on the spot, that was really a big part of our intention, because theory is good, but it's hardly what you get away when you do this kind of workshop, because the theory is good, but if you don't try, you will never get to do things. So we did, of course, an initial introduction. We shared the stories. We digged into the activities that we will see later. Guide me hands off, pitch me an idea, let's compromise, say the right things. It was really interactive. We had breakout rooms to do those. And then we really digged into creating a mini plan because we wanted people to get away with something. And then, of course, as part of any project like this, the reflection part and what did you come out with this workshop?
Yeah, no, it's really well put, and I think we did show. We were deciding whether or not to how much do we show them the 5 skills that I showed you earlier. How do we deep dive into that? And we decided actually of the 2 options, we rather just we did flash it up on screen. These are the 5 skills, but we said we're going to let you feel it today, and we're not going to go into detail. And then we'll wrap back up, and then you said, did you recognize those skills? And pretty much everyone said yes. So learning by doing, learning by feeling is sort of the same thing. So we're going to deep dive into some of these activities now, and then we'll try and show you our thought process as to where we started and where we ended up. That's probably the most important thing for you, I think, today. Yeah, I think it's back to you, Tan. I think you're going to take to activity one, aren't you? Or first set of activities, because you helped build that pre-work. I mean, a lot of conversation on that.
Definitely, pre-work was a huge part because I am a big believer on self-reflection and making people think about things and prepare for a session like this, to come with already some ideas on what they want to take, where they are, and things like this. But what I really loved about this project and this approach was how we collaborated around this, because I came up with 20 different questions and reflection points that I wanted to send in advance to the participants. And then we had the catch up and we said, okay, do we really want to ask them to reflect on their values? Will this bring them something useful for the workshop itself? No, then we just drop it. And it was really funny to see how everyone was very open to this, to dropping things, to changing things, to reiterate and reverse engineer what we wanted to include based on the actual end results that we wanted, because that really guided us to streamline the things that we were sharing to make sure that it was all connected. The 3 questions were very simple for the initial pre-work so that they could reflect, but not too much. Then they came into the workshop and we had the self-assessment against the 5 stepping skills, which was also an interesting part. But because when we designed it, there were spectrums, like I do it, I don't do it, things like this. And we were like, does it really have to be one way or another? And we discussed a lot about how we should also share with people that it's a spectrum. You can be here sometimes, there another time. You can be on one side for specific reasons because that person needs specific direction or other things like this, but really sharing that experience and understanding that there is no black and white in doing management and managing people. And then the guest speakers, really, that was a very, very impactful way to show 2 different journeys, but somehow to extract the importance of some really simple skills that we shared here, like guiding people, understanding what people need, being there. So I think the impact of having 2 people sharing their experience was much more than just telling them, this is how you manage, or this is what a manager should be doing. It was more, there are many different styles, many different things, and there is not just one that works. Saad?
Yeah, again, well said. And I think going back to something that Tijana said, we didn't have design principles per se when we started this project. We wanted to use lean, project management, sprint, get to one sprint, and then go to the next one. And what do we learn? The only principles we had was we've got to keep it simple and accessible and anti-theory. And we didn't really know what that meant until we create these activities. So to go from the 20 questions in the pre-warm-up activity to the 4 that you see there on the left, I mean, was just as a consequence of constant dialogue about what would make it work. And yeah, I love the story. Someone said someone was surprised that in a training workshop we had 2 guest speakers, because usually you find that in a kind of like a webinar. So that's an interesting format. And what it did was beautifully set up the rest of the day, because we started the 4 activities after this section, and inviting them to reflect was really great. And I had briefed the 2 speakers in advance. They sent me kindly their thoughts, and in some respects it wasn't tangible. So I said, please can you make it a bit more tangible for new beginners, and just actionable stuff like that. So that was really great. But yeah, I agree with Tijana. It really did set up the whole day, and was highly iterative as well. So as we go on to the 4 key core activities, really in a bit more detail, even down to what we named these activities was just really, really like crucial. We wanted to be fun and engaging. and we want it to be a symbol, you know, a kind of a sign as to what these activities actually are. So the first activity was around this whole concept of managers are no longer doing, right? They're guiding. Before, when you're an IC, you're kind of in there, you measure quantitatively what you do, maybe by the reports or by emails or whatever. Now you've got to step back. And if you've got a team or stakeholders that you're working with, even if you're not a line manager, you're working with a lot more stakeholders when you're a manager. So how do you learn to ask the right questions and guide? We had a great conversation, didn't we, Tijana? Which was again spontaneous, and we made a note of it, and we checked ourselves on it, which was, do we want these to be work professional activities, or do we want them personal activities? Personal, meaning non-work related, are great because they're more relatable and you can get into it. But equally, we know people from past experience have said, well, but now how do I apply that though into the world of work? You know, so we decided that we would go for 50-50 or a bit of both. So the first activity, we also wanted to scaffold the learning as well. So start simple and get to something a bit more challenging towards the end. So the first activity was a really great one where we broke up into groups and we asked the participants to volunteer and direct and guide another member on effectively how to draw a flower, as you can tell there. But we did it 3 times. The first time we asked them to give them no guidance and just to give them like broad, like general sort of talk. And then by the end, we got to the fact that the third person who volunteered to draw it got very specific guidance. And the aim was really to bring out how important it is to clarify what the end goal is to your team or to stakeholders, how also not to get stuck in. And you could see some people were really struggling to reach into the Zoom call, and you know, if they were there in person, probably they may have taken the pen from them, kind of thing. And it's that kind of understanding your default position that do you struggle with sort of like you're not getting stuck in, basically. And that's not a bad thing. There will be times, and we said this, and it goes back to Tijana's point of being on a spectrum. There will be times where you need to be hands-on, but you also need to balance that with being hands-off, which is typically the area where most managers struggle with. They may have someone who actually is all the way hands-off and actually needs to find their way to be a bit more involved in the process. So that was the activity. Pitch Me an Idea was a combination of a kind of a professional activity. So we asked them to take on the role of a communication manager at a firm, and they were tasked to help the HR with promoting a new wellness initiative in the company. And we gave them 3 characters, different ages, different backgrounds, a marketer, an accountant, etc. And we said, how would you effectively bring these stakeholders? How would you convince them about this initiative, and how would you listen to them as well to take their feedback on board so that you can use that to shape your final proposal for the wellness program? One of the things we became really clear about is that there are multiple skills. In any one time, you're going to call on multiple skills. You're not just going to be listening. You're not just going to be managing a project. This activity, as simple as it sounds, has a lot packed into there, which is about stakeholder buy-in. But notice we don't use that language in any of the instructions because of the language barrier, and we kind of don't want it to go over people's heads. How would you convince them? What would you talk to them about? That kind of thing. And you can see that they reflected on that, which was really great. Activity 3 was all about compromising and preferences and talking to people in different ways, which is one of the stepping stone skills. And this was a bit of both. So we asked them to plan a trip, and it could be anywhere, but they've got a budget of a couple of $1,000s, which brings that financial skills into it without it being fully financial. And managers have to cope with budgets often. And we gave them 5 different team members' preferences, but we also built freedom and choice to make it more, you know, sort of personalized. So we said you can use those 5 team members there that you see in yellow boxes, but if you wanted to create your own, you can, so long as you can demonstrate. We then thought a lot about this, didn't we, Tijana, that how do we get them to present back? What do we get them to present back? The how was more important than the what. So you see the what there is what destination they've chosen, what the itinerary is, and we've also got a section there on their trade-offs. This was the key bit. Most managers jump straight to the end outcome when they're presenting and talking and communicating because they're not used to it. Speaking to more senior managers, what we asked them to do is explain their thought process as to how they arrived at that final outcome. What did they discount? What did they count in, etc.? Because that is a really important skill to demonstrate that you're not attached to emotionally to an idea, but that you're actually, you know, able to be a bit objective and come up with multiple different scenarios. But there was a lot packed into here, probably under those 5 stepping stone skills, Tan, and maybe we should like unpick some of the sub skills that are like built into there. And the final one was something that we're all probably familiar with, which was feeding back. And this was awesome. So Madeeha put this together. I wish she was here to, this is her baby. And she built, so we, as you can probably tell, we're often case study based because putting it live in a scenario is the best way. If you teach people skills which are sort of out of the work context, they're not going to know how to apply it. So originally, and I explained to you the thought process, practicing the skills we teach our learners on the Get Me Manager Ready. Originally, Madeeha created a case study, this case study on AI. So, you know, your typical chat GPTs. And it came out with some reasonable stuff, but it was very convoluted, very complex language. It also didn't have enough detail in the right places, but it was a good skeleton. 2 or 3 things we realized when we were thinking about anti-theory, accessibility, you know, not too much jargon. We gave the company a name, which we call it Elegant Chocolates, make it semi-relatable. We also decided it was a marketing, the AI spat out a marketing kind of activity, but we were wondering, will people understand these marketing concepts if they're not from that world? So we simplified it and we made it about the launch of a new chocolate. Even chocolate as a subject matter was chosen because, you know, who doesn't like chocolate? I'm actually genuinely allergic. Since birth, I don't eat sweet. So chocolates, fruits, cakes, my wife gets the second helpings for that. And that's a true allergy as opposed to being anti-theory. And so we chose chocolate to sort of be super relatable. And then what we said to make it really easy, we stripped it back and said, got 2 characters, Sarah and Thomas. And we wanted to demonstrate that Sarah has, in launch of a new chocolate, is minimalist and just wants to focus on the flavors. Whereas Thomas is very sociable, focuses on outdoor experiences, and he wants a shot to be people eating the chocolate and enjoying it. Very different. And so we asked the people, the learners, to put themselves in the shoes of the manager of these 2 colleagues. How would he give them feedback? And we did live role plays. Me, Tijana, Madeeha, we played either Sarah or Thomas. Obviously, I played Thomas. And we basically threw in some interesting curved balls, didn't we? Did you want to say something about that, Tijana? I feel like I'm talking a bit too much, but yeah.
It was quite funny because we really dig deep into our actors and we interpreted Sarah and Thomas very well. And it was really funny to see how people were able to react and to, on the spot, do this role play and give some of the things that came out from the managers that were providing us feedback. I think it was really on point and it made me feel like I was really Sarah and I was really getting amazing feedback from my manager because it made me reflect and realize. So I think it was hard for the people participating, being put on the spot to do something like this in front of other people, but it was really like the kind of experience that you will have in reality. So it was an interesting activity that it's not easy to pull off, but I think it went really, really well and people really enjoyed thinking about it and how to change that perception and that feedback.
Yeah, and I remember we acted like as if there was no problem. And actually it was just Sarah, and the people were ready for that, right? It's like, oh, well, the rest of my script that I prepared in my head was based on either Sarah or Thomas accepting. Now I've got to change on the fly, which is exactly what happens. Now it's not about the issue, it's about how do I help you recognize that there's a challenge. One of the learners said, what relationship would you like with Sarah? And I thought that was just powerful stuff because, you know, it made us reflect actually as well. But we also found that there were feedback is also a little bit of coaching. We also found that there were some were skirting around the issue. There was only one learner who actually got into the nub of, but what does the customer want? And what are the specific, what actually happened? And that was the learning in them as well. That feedback isn't just having a conversation, it's actually genuinely helping your team understand some stuff. So that was really, really interesting as well. Mini plan, yeah, this is the bit that, you know, reflections. Again, we wanted to make it interactive. We came up with a few design choices for how this should look like. I guess the thought process was, do we want them to reflect on each of the 5 skills? Number 1, that was one option. Number 2, do we get them to, another option was, do we, because it's about behavior change and mindset shift, do we want to ask them to reflect on new behaviors and things they've learned and new habits they've learned about themselves? As you can tell, we ruled those two things out because we thought it would be too frameworky, too complex, and we didn't think that there'd be enough time for people to have learned their habits in a way that they could do something meaningful with it straight away, definitely after the workshop. So we came up with something really simple, just identify just 2 areas rather than 5 against 5 skills, 2 areas, and that could be any one of the 5 skills. Again, freedom, personalization, chance to just flex. I want to be better at, and when I next, have the conversation with my team, or when I next try and give someone a task, I'll step back a little bit or whatever it was. And so you can kind of see their blow up of 1 or 2 of the comments. Again, to make it engaging and fun, we use an Instagram kind of reel, or if you like people to post some quote about yourself, what would it look like and what would it be? And so just to make it a bit fun. After the workshop, we did give some cheat sheets as well because we wanted them to continue their practice. So really fun. Each linked one cheat sheet, 2-sided, for each of the 5 stepping stone skills, with stuff that we didn't cover in the workshop, as well as stuff that we did. So just to reinforce as well as provide some new learning. So yeah, so how did it go? Tijana, me and you can tag team on this. I think it went really really well given everything. I mean, we were very nervous. We didn't really know, but I think we think I forgot to mention, sorry, I should have said this. We had 11 people online and about 7 or 8 people face to face, run separately. The one me and Tijana and Madeeha did was online with the 11, and then I ran one locally for my company with a couple of others from outside in the housing industry. And broadly similar feedback, just a collection. I won't go through it all, but I think, what was a standout for you, Tijana? Because for me, it was really interesting to see the feedback, but I'd be interested in your thoughts.
I think the real eye opener was the fact that even if there were people that told to know what a manager is, they came to the workshop and they were like, oh, okay, but there are so many things that go into each single task. As Saad said, it was 4 different activities, but for each of the activities, there were skill sets that were not even in the 5 stepping stones that we say. So it was eye-opening for them, and not starting from theory, not starting from those are the skills, those are how you use them, it was really the other way around. You practice them and then you reflect on what it means and why you had to do it in that way, or why did you choose to do it that way. So I think the real life experience, the interactivity, was a huge positive for the participants.
Yeah, I'm really pleased that came out. By the way, if you haven't guessed already, we designed these activities in Mural. So no slides. Miro or Mural are just great tools to use. And everyone really commented on how great that was as well. So we're definitely going to continue with that. We asked the pre and post questions, if you remember. So we asked, how well do you understand what a manager does? And do you understand the basic skills a manager needs? And do you feel ready? They're all kind of asking slightly different but similar sort of interconnected questions. So what we found was interesting in the pre-work, quite a few people gave themselves a 4. I really understand what the role is, and I understand the skills, but actually they ranked themselves slightly lower on readiness, which was interesting. So we thought, okay, but there's not much room for them to improve then, which was really interesting. So when we did the poll survey, in the first 2 questions, how well do you understand, and do you feel you have the skills? They stayed fairly steady, right? Because I think people probably learned that, okay, although I know now what skills are involved, they're probably different to my previous sort of ideas. But yeah, I do feel like I understand it now after the workshop. We slightly tweaked the question pre and post. So in the post, the only difference we added was after the workshop, do you understand? So just to make it sort of clear, but the core of the question was the same. But what we were really pleased to see, albeit a small sample pilot, that the readiness improved, which was really interesting because we even debated, what does ready mean? We call it Get Me Manager Ready. Are we going to get there ready if it's a stepping stone? We really debated about this stuff. And I really like the way we came up with options, and then we decided the pros and cons of each, and then we worked them way through. So that was the outcome. I did, if you remember, I mentioned that our approach is that we will create a Get Me Manager Ready workshop as a stepping stone, and then create other leadership and management workshops that will be much more deep dive into the skills. So we ran 5, 6 of them, and we had about half of the participants who came to the Get Me Manager Ready attend, and more are going to come. And they went down a treat. They said, okay, now I get it. Like, chance for me to deep dive into a lot of these skills is really, really valuable for me. Where you see this, so we ran these sessions already from May to August, so May to July. And so we're running them again from September to December. It's for anyone, they're totally free, highly interactive, same standard, high quality stuff. Where you see the star, that just means that they're new workshops. So we're going to run them for the first time, because the feedback we got from the cohort was, love the topics you put on, but could have something around, providing more feedback and effective one-on-ones, etc. So they're all free. It's just highly interactive. We want to make a real difference to it as well, and it's thanks to the volunteer community who come together to really challenge ourselves about what we want to, how we want to deliver this stuff. Is really, really important. You see the bottom right box there. We are creating another 10 more free workshops from January to August next year. Between these, we'll have 18 free workshops, and that will pretty much cover most leadership and management topics, right? So there's a chance that we will love, if you've got zero budget or no budget and you're struggling to put on these workshops, I'm pretty confident that 60% of the content is pretty similar across most organizations, and no matter even stage of growth of the company. So there's a chance for us to come together and really decide what we would love for the content to be in these workshops, including the ones that are coming up as well as the ones next year. So I'll put a link in the form. We're creating a bootstrap community of people, with zero budget or no budget. And if you want to be part of Bootstrap L&D group, I'll put a link in after this, after we're done. Lessons learned, because we've been reflecting as we've been going along, which is great. But I'll ask Tijana to wrap up with this.
I think the real beauty of this project was the collaboration. So what we really loved and what worked well was really to pick the right things, to focus on the right things and make it interactive. The mix of professional and personal activities, the collaborative work in breakout rooms, and keeping the external speakers, that was really inspiring and really made it real somehow. And the fact that we had the opportunity to do that and to reflect on these right after the workshop and sit down and ask ourselves, what did work? What did we do really well? What's really important for us to do the retrospective? We learned a lot along the way. Definitely we want more framing, giving more tips and more learning lessons during and after each of the activities. The feedback activity was pretty heavy, so putting it as last, we thought it was a little bit, the energy was still high, but it could have been even higher, so it will be more impactful if we did it earlier. Managing time, because we had very little time for the development of their mini plan. So managing online with the interactive activity, it's wonderful, but you can get carried away. So we had a lot of discussion on how to make it more time effective. And face-to-face team building to overcome shyness, because you're in a room with a lot of people that you don't know, and you have to put yourself into the activity to lead, to do things, to present, and it's not easy, especially when you are just at that starting point, when you still don't have those skills. So I think as a group, what we have learned is the beauty of less is more, and reminding ourselves all the time what we are trying to achieve, and then reverse engineer and make it as easy as possible for the learner. Saad?
I can't add to that. I think you've said it so well. lots of learnings, but super exciting project to have worked on. And yeah, you know why we do this? We don't want anyone to be left alone and be thrown in the deep end. So let's get more managers ready from day one if we can. We've got more cohorts coming up, one on 10th of September. And we've got a US time zone specific one as well, because a couple of people couldn't make it. So Amy Raffaelli is getting involved with that to bring it to a online location near you. And then we've got one in November as well. And so yeah, please, there's a link there. There's also a I think we can circulate these PowerPoints as well, but there's a QR code there as well. You've got my email. You can reach us both and Madeeha as well on LinkedIn. So thanks so much for the opportunity. We can take any questions. I hope that was okay, Anna Maria.
Yes, that was perfect. I'm stealing the link so that I can add it in the post. Yeah, so we can keep this on the screen for a little while longer. Or you can put the link in the chat. I almost like to have the conversation without slides. Thank you very much for this. I took some notes. I want to open up the floor for everyone still present for questions. If you want Saad or Tijana to go deeper into any of the bits and pieces, but also if there are no questions, generally, what did you like about it? What triggered you? What was something that stuck with you? Because we still have a couple of minutes that we can use for some exchange and conversation. So feel free to simply use the raise your hand or use the chat if it's more comfortable to add or contribute. Let's see if there's something coming. Okay, Samuele.
That's a great question.
Do you wanna take the mic, Samuele?
Yeah, it's fine. So hi everyone. Thank you very much for the presentation. I was curious about the evaluation part of your activity that you described. Can you say something more about how you got to those 4.7 and 79% NPS, and also if you have also some follow-ups you have scheduled in time and how to go about that? Thank you.
Yeah, no, great point. Thanks for the question. We used a SurveyMonkey style survey on a scale of 1 to 5 for those 3 core questions of how well do you understand the skills? Not really, absolutely. What the descriptors? NPS is your typical one. How likely would you be to recommend this to a colleague or friend? And then we've got 15 or 16 responses across them all. And to calculate NPS, we just plugged it into a free NPS calculator, which asks you how many numbers of people do you have, because the survey didn't have that functionality. Have done follow-up conversation, not really interviews, but I have done follow-up conversations with 5 or 6 people, which has led to deeper understanding of what did they mean by tips. Or someone said, I love the wisdom approach to the way we did things. And so I reached out to them, what did you mean by that? And they said, you didn't just come across as experts yourself, you asked us for our experiences, which is what they mean by wisdom. A follow-up, we've got a plan to do it, but we haven't yet agreed when and what that will look like. I think that's a fantastic reminder for us to do that, to really see if they're applying it. Through the conversations that I've had softly with people, they are already saying to me they have, but it'd be great to capture that more formally so we can get them to reflect on it independently. So yeah, thanks for that question.
Thank you.
Bye, Ned. All right, there we have group. Okay. How would you call it? Bootstrap L&D? What was it called, Saad? Your community?
Yeah, Bootstrap L&D. Yeah, for those with little or no budget.
All right. Any other thoughts, insights, ideas? There's a lot of great work. Thanks for sharing in the chat. Anything else that kind of surfaced for you?
Hi, Victoria here.
Hey.
Can I ask something? Thank you so much for your approach. I really loved it. And I was taking a lot of notes, especially with all the insights. And I was wondering, you were mentioning the interactive part a lot. Are you potentially also considering maybe a kind of a community approach towards the managers that participated in the training? Did you notice it that already, like maybe from that first session, some connections were being created, or something like this that could be built upon in the future?
Yeah, do you want to take that, Tijana? Thanks for the question.
Yeah, that was some of the things that we also thought at the beginning before starting the workshop. Then we did the workshop, we created, I think, the community. But it has to be, Anna Maria can have a lecture here on community and how to make community work, because at the end of the day, it takes time for people. They were together very little time. They did strike a little bit of a connection, but not enough to start really working together like, oh, we're on the same journey. We could communicate and build on that. I think there is a little bit more effort to be done there to be able to create that. But it's something that we considered and we think could really be beneficial for new managers.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's potentially like managers can be quite lonely, right? Especially within their own peer network, because they're part of a management team and everyone needs to show their best. So I'm very interested in how we can basically help them create the kind of normal, usually support networks that you have before you become a manager, and it kind of starts disappearing. Yeah.
See, Anna Maria, this is how it all starts. Someone has an idea.
I know. That's how it begins.
Grows. We have the functionality. We have the functionality. So we use a platform called Learn Worlds, which some of you may be familiar with. And I'm just seeing the smiley face from Ines. We would love to do that, because especially when with all the other workshops now, we've got people who didn't attend the Get Me Manager Ready, who attended the others, because we just made it open to everybody through a Luma link. So we would love to, we've got more people who can join that community. If people are interested, it takes us, as Tijana said, a lot to sort of curate that and get it going, and role model behaviors and stuff like that. So that would be the next natural organic step. We could accelerate that if you've got, great volunteers. No pressure, Victoria, but
Didn't sound like that at all.
Slight nudge, invitation to raise a hand. Speaking of community, sometimes when a community full-fledged feels a bit daunting and too big and too intensive. Alternatively, you could go with a volunteer matching, like a pair matching. So after the workshop, you could open it up and say, whoever would like to be paired with a buddy, fill up this form, and then we will kind of make that connection, curate that connection, but then it's up to them to meet and plan and whatever, but you kind of facilitate that one-on-one, at least with one other person or with two other people. So that could be a bit of more, let's say, still takes a lot of time to curate those connections, but you can let them go afterwards, right? And you empower them.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to just also reflect on Samuel's point about we didn't make the skills too explicit, because we where I worked, we had this principle called structured informality. We were such a large, complex organization. We were global in 100 locations. And sometimes the idea was so simple, but the way we talked about it made it complex. And so it made it difficult to socialize ideas and for people to get on board with things. So we were religious in simplifying things, because when you keep things simple, they're easy to execute. And so we applied that principle as we're training managers. We wanted to role model the idea of simplicity and keeping it focused. And I do think sometimes in L&D, and even though I've been in operational with revenue growth and had a couple hundred staff members and stuff like that, I always had an L&D portfolio because I had an education background too. At one point I was a dean, but that's a whole nother story. And combining those skill sets is trying to make it work in such a way that you can make it less frameworky, because it might be a controversial view. Sometimes theory in and of itself can be a barrier to learning. So I'll give you an example. If I'm teaching Pastel analysis, which is a way to analyze the external operating environment, so P is for political, E is for economic, etc. S is for social, T is for technological. the standard way would be to say, here's P, here's what it stands for, and I'll spend 20 minutes doing that, and then I'll give you a practical example, and I'll probably cover all of the letters, even if they don't make sense or have relevance. The way I'm trying to create a new way of looking at it is reverse engineer it. So we give you a case study, in which case we give you Calendly, which is on a true workshop, and we say they want to introduce 2 new add-on features on Calendly, which we all use as to book meetings. One has to be AI, and then we give them a drag and drop feature, and we'll give them 4 of these pestle factors, but we won't call them that. We'll relabel them. So it's something called synonym learning. So you just relabel the stuff and give a different word or a placeholder phrase. That's more, because in brain-based learning, when we have something in our short-term memory, we create our own daft meaning, right? Until we understand it, then we graduate to the more complex meaning, and then it goes into our long-term memory. So the idea is that we'll give you drag and drop, so we give new labels. So which factor do you think they create this feature because of AI? Which factor do you think was driving them? And there was a icon called technology, and they drag and drop that. So by the way, that thing that you just learned is called pastel. Okay, now you can go off and you can learn it. So we genuinely applied those principles in the Get Me Manager Ready. Didn't know it at the time. Now we can say that was our approach. We just feel it because we knew that was what would work.
I want to add something to that point, because it made me think when one of the feedback was we could have used more tips, like practical tips of etc. And I think that's one of the, it's hard to do proper, good, interactive, immersive learning, because the key then is obviously in the design of the activity. But for the participants, is how do you surface the learning? How do you make them aware that they have learned? And so the debriefing piece at the end becomes very crucial after the whole playing and touching and moving and kind of trying to draw a flower and all that. The debriefing piece and the reflection piece becomes very important. And that is hard to do, to ask the right questions, to ask the proper thought-provoking things for people's brains to go, aha. So I think that's why we struggle at times with that. But I also loved this, how you went with scenario. And one of the notes that I took is, I really reminded, it might seem a simple task that you do. And obviously, I think, what was it, 4 hours, 5 hours, your workshop?
4 hours? 3 and a half with a lunch break.
So it's a super short time to learn any skills, right? Like you scratch a bit the surface. But I liked that you throw them into the deep water, like that saying goes. But as they play around, chances are with your feedback support and that debriefing, that they get to some sort of level of efficiency or efficacy where they think, oh, actually, I can do this. And that happens very rarely with theory, because in theory, the brain listens to the theory and we think, I get that. But after the thing, after the workshop, after the training, is very hard to remember what that was that you got, because you comprehend it, but then you need to go and take it and apply it in real work. And if you haven't played with that concept at all, you're probably struggling to find the confidence to play with that. And so these little experiments in workshops are crucial to build that confidence. Like, oh, I've done it. I was actually put in a role play with Sarah or with Thomas. And, they throw me a curveball and I was able to manage that. So now I kind of leave the workshop with that uplifted, almost like self-confidence in myself that I can manage situations. So it's empowering, exactly. It can also backfire though, and that's another.
But you said it so well. I made a note of the self-efficacy. I think you're right, and I think it's showing them that they can. That's I think what we mean by ready, or give you one more step rather than asking you to jump, make the big leap into management. We're going to give it a stepping stone, because we don't want to make the activities too stretching. So we did have some activities, actually. We had about 8 long list activities, which we didn't explain, by the way. And we took some out. We stuck with these 4 because there was one that was a bit too, asked them to do something for a games company, pretend to be working for a games company. It was quite stretchy. So the level of stretch has to be enough that they learn, but not too much that they just shut down.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Then that design phase becomes very important. Tijana, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I mean, even with the activity 1, which was a drawing, and there was like, give just the shapes without telling what it is, or give what it is without giving how they need to draw it. Or there was like, tell him what you're trying to do, a book for kids to learn English with the key aspects. So there were 3 different things. And it was funny how they also reflected on the fact that, for example, if given just design a flower, they were empowered and they had amazing energy. And if given the specifics, they were less empowered and less interested in designing this flower. And so really reflecting on what works for you doesn't work for everyone. I think it was a key learning during the workshop that they could take away, because there were so many activities that showed that there is no right way or no wrong way. And it was important to reflect on that the fact that I don't like direction doesn't mean that everyone doesn't like direction. So it was really important for me to bring that out, because it was an interesting learning.
All right. Anything else that kind of stuck with you or made you think, or any other connections our brains have made? Because I want to go back a bit to the mini plan that you've done in the end, because it reminded me of a conversation I think I had with Ben, and he's not in the session today, but we had a chat on what he called, I think, behavioral cues. And your mini plan kind of reminded me of that in a way, if maybe an extra question would have been added. I absolutely love I want to be better at. That's so normal. Like, we all say that. I want to get better at things. I want to be better at, like, that's what I would tell my friends. So the language, like the no jargon, is like coming through again. And then when I next, I actually thought that was the behavioral cue and not the action you will take. So it's almost like, I want to get better at X. When the next time the cue happens, I will do this differently. So I don't know much about that, behavioral cues, and I haven't really worked on any projects related to that. But these are basically ways to help leaders, managers, like anyone that is trying to, like, we're trying to change behaviors, we're trying to improve behaviors and build capabilities. And they happen in a context in real life. When you're interacting, you have to do things, you have to take decisions. And so usually we are unaware of the cues and the stimuli that prompt a certain behavior. And so the first step is almost to recognize, what is that cue for this behavior, in order for me to rise into awareness and try to tackle it in a different way. So it reminded me of that. It wasn't quite there, and maybe it's not a simple concept, so probably Saad is like, it's too complex for this purpose, but it just reminded me of that. And I thought, like, how interesting. Yeah,
I like that. I think it could easily add an extra statement of, and I will, and I made a note of this. I think that's a fantastic idea, and it's a good that you spotted it, because the more conversational we can make it, the better. The more simple we can make it into people's day-to-day language. I mean, I see it. I work at board level now as well, and I see a lot of senior executives struggle with this. I mean, something that should be just written in half a paragraph takes two pages. I'm like, this is nobody's going to read this. You know what I mean? And so there was so much stuff embedded into this, and I think what I've learned from this reflection, and there's so much we putting this stuff together, allowed us to go back to where it all started. And even when the mini plan, we put it together, Inez, who's on the call, she kindly helped out, and she provided a lot of already pre-made templates in Miro and stuff like that. And me and Inez were talking about the fact that it's so complex. It's like that's pen, like arrow here, arrow there, arrow there. Like, oh my God, I mean, just looking at this, I'm just gonna feel like I want to sleep, you know, or do something to somebody. You know, and so we simplified it very much. So sorry, Victoria's got a question.
Before
No, I
Victoria
just wanted-
goes, just one second, Victoria. I want to say bye to everyone in the chat because we're at time, but we're willing to stay if you're, you know, if you have things to put out there. We've got some more time to debate. Other than that, I want to officially thank Saad and Tijana for taking the time to take us through your program. It was amazing, and thanks everyone who joined today. That's it, Victoria. Sorry to interrupt. The floor is yours.
No, thank you. Sorry, I just was thinking also about what you were saying, Anna Maria, about that, you know, basically the behavioral cues and the habits. And I'm actually more employee well-being specialist. And that triggered me to think that when you think about that cue, you could also reflect how you feel in these situations. And that's coming back to Tijana, you were talking about that drawing and whether you get a lot of guidance or little guidance. You know, do you get enthusiastic or do you start feeling like hot and sweaty and things like this? Because people can really relate to that, and that can also help them recognize, oh, this is the cue. This is the situation where I feel like I have
cue. Yeah.
That's a small addition. Maybe it's overcomplicated.
No, that I think that has its merits actually. And if you were now there were so many skills tackled and so many behaviors, but if you were to go like targeting one particular behavior, then that's where it's worth going granular.
Recognize it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Victoria, for the additions, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Tijana. Thank you, Saad. We can't wait to see what else comes from your little community of doers. This is beautiful. Enjoy the rest of your day, wherever in the world you are, and we'll see you in the community.
Thank you.
Take care.